Natural law theory in healthcare ethics. When healthcare professionals think about ethics, they often focus on rules, outcomes, or professional standards. Natural law theory begins at a deeper level. It asks whether there are objective moral truths built into the structure of human nature itself, and whether ethical healthcare practice requires aligning our actions with those truths. Natural law theory is an ethical framework that posits the existence of universal moral principles derived from nature or reason. According to this view, moral norms are not created by societies, institutions, or individuals. They are discovered through rational reflection on human nature, human flourishing, and the purposes inherent in life itself. In healthcare ethics, natural law theory holds that ethical decision making must be grounded in objective moral realities rather than subjective preferences, cultural trends, or purely outcome based calculations. Certain actions are considered morally right or wrong because they either align with or violate fundamental aspects of human well being. This tradition is most closely associated with Thomas Aquinas, who argued that moral law is accessible to human reason and rooted in the natural order. For Aquinas, natural law reflects a rational participation in a moral structure that governs human life and directs it toward flourishing. In healthcare contexts, this means that moral reasoning begins with an understanding of what it means to be human. Human beings are embodied, relational, vulnerable, and oriented toward life, health, and meaningful agency. Ethical healthcare practice, from a natural law perspective, must respect these fundamental goods. One of the central implications of natural law theory in healthcare ethics is the strong emphasis on the intrinsic value of human life. Life is not merely a resource to be optimized or exchanged. It is a basic good that grounds moral obligation. Actions that directly undermine the integrity of human life are therefore considered morally impermissible, regardless of intention or outcome. This framework aligns closely with healthcare ethics principles such as non-maleficence and beneficence, but it grounds them in objective moral reasoning rather than professional convention alone. The obligation to avoid harm and promote well-being is not simply a policy preference, it arises from the moral structure of human nature. Natural law theory also emphasizes moral intention. An action is evaluated not only by what happens as a result, but by what the agent chooses to do. In healthcare, this distinction becomes especially important in end-of-life care, pain management, and high-risk interventions. An action aimed at healing or relieving suffering may be ethically distinct from an action aimed at causing harm, even if outcomes overlap. This focus on intention does not ignore consequences, but it refuses to collapse moral judgment into outcomes alone. Ethical reasoning must consider whether an action respects or violates the basic goods inherent in human life. Natural law theory further supports the idea that moral norms apply universally. Ethical standards in healthcare are not merely cultural agreements or institutional policies. They are grounded in reason and human nature. This universality provides a basis for moral critique when healthcare practices conflict with fundamental human goods, even if those practices are socially accepted or legally permitted. In healthcare ethics, this has important implications for professional integrity. Clinicians are not simply service providers responding to demand, they are moral agents responsible for acting in accordance with objective ethical standards. Conscience, in this framework, is not a personal preference but a rational judgment about moral truth. At the same time, natural law theory acknowledges the complexity of healthcare practice. Applying universal moral principles requires careful reasoning, contextual judgment, and humility. Ethical dilemmas often arise not because moral truths are unclear, but because human goods come into tension under conditions of suffering, scarcity, or uncertainty. Critics of natural law theory argue that it can appear rigid or insufficiently responsive to individual circumstances. However, proponents respond that without objective moral grounding, healthcare ethics risks becoming purely procedural or subject to shifting social pressures. In your healthcare ethics framework, natural law theory functions as a stabilizing moral anchor. It reminds healthcare professionals that ethical practice is not invented case by case, nor determined solely by outcomes or consensus, but rooted in enduring moral truths about human life and dignity. Natural law theory does not replace other ethical approaches, but it provides a foundational moral orientation. It informs how duties are understood, how principles are grounded, and why certain moral boundaries should not be crossed, even in pursuit of good ends. Understanding natural law theory is essential in healthcare ethics because it explains why ethics cannot be reduced to efficiency, preference, or power. It affirms that ethical healthcare must remain aligned with the moral realities of human nature, human dignity, and human flourishing.